The space station called Horizon's Edge floated in the darkness between three star systems. Millions of beings from hundreds of worlds lived there. They traded, worked, loved, and died in its metal corridors. It was a place where fortunes were made and lost every day. Una walked through the lower market with her head down. She was Valari, a species known for their tall bodies, pale blue skin, and silver eyes. Most Valari were proud and walked with their chins high. But Una had nothing to be proud of anymore. Her family was ruined. Her father had made bad deals with dangerous people. Now he was dead, and the debt belonged to her. The Kef Syndicate owned her family name, their small business, and soon they would own her too. Under galactic law, an unmarried female could be taken as payment for debt. It was an old and cruel law, but it still existed. The Kef Syndicate used it often. They would take her to one of their pleasure houses on a distant moon. She would never be free again. But there was one way out. A married female could not be seized. If she had a husband, she was protected. The problem was simple. No one wanted to marry a woman with her debts. No Valari male would touch her family name. No alien would risk making enemies of the Kef Syndicate. That left only one option. Humans were everywhere on Horizon's Edge. They worked the dangerous jobs. They loaded cargo, cleaned waste systems, and fixed broken machines. Most aliens looked down on them. Humans were small, weak, and short-lived. They had no special abilities. They could not see in the dark like the Keth, or breathe underwater like the Mirai, or lift 10 times their weight like the Goroth. Humans were nothing special. That was what everyone believed. Una found him in the lower docks. His name was Taiho. She had asked around about humans who might agree to a contract marriage. Every person pointed her to the same man. He was sitting alone on a cargo container, eating a simple meal from a metal box. He was not tall for a human. His hair was black and cut short. His face was plain and forgettable. His clothes were worn and patched in many places. But it was his eyes that made Una pause. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held a strange depth. When he looked at her, she felt like he was seeing everything about her at once. She had heard that he never spoke. Some said he was mentally damaged. Others said he had taken a religious vow. No one knew the truth because he never told anyone. Una stood before him and explained her situation. She spoke for 10 minutes. She told him about her father's death, the Syndicate's claim, and what would happen to her if she remained unmarried. She offered him money she did not have. She promised to free him from the marriage as soon as she could clear her debts. Taiho listened without moving. His face showed nothing. When she finished, he simply nodded once. That was it. No questions. No demands. No negotiation. 3 days later, they stood before a civil official and signed the marriage documents. The official looked at them with pity. A Valari woman marrying a silent human cargo worker. How far she had fallen. Una moved into Taiho's quarters that night. It was a small room in the cheapest section of the station. 1 bed, 1 table, 2 chairs, and a tiny cooking area. The walls were bare metal. The only decoration was a small green plant sitting by the window that looked out into space. Taiho pointed to the bed. He pointed to himself, then to the floor. His meaning was clear. She would sleep on the bed. He would sleep on the floor. She tried to argue, but he simply turned away and began preparing food. His movements were smooth and precise. He cooked a simple meal of rice and vegetables and set it before her without a word. They ate in silence. It was not uncomfortable. It was simply quiet. In the days that followed, Una began to notice things about her strange husband. He woke before her every morning. When she opened her eyes, food was already waiting on the table. He left for work at the docks, and he returned in the evening. He never complained. He never asked for anything. His hands were rough with calluses, but not like a normal worker's hands. The calluses were in strange places. On his palms, on the edges of his fingers, on the space between his thumb and first finger. He moved differently than other humans. When he walked, his feet made no sound. When he sat, his back was perfectly straight. When someone entered the room behind him, he knew before they made a sound. Other humans on the station treated him strangely. They nodded to him with respect. They moved out of his way. When Yuna asked them why, they changed the subject. One night, she woke in the darkness. Something had disturbed her sleep, though she did not know what. She looked around the small room and found Taiho sitting by the door. He was not sleeping. He was not moving. He was simply sitting there, watching the entrance, his body perfectly still. His eyes caught the faint light from the window. For just a moment, they seemed to glow like an animal's eyes in the darkness. Yuna felt her heart beat faster. Not from fear exactly, from something else. A feeling that she had married someone far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She lay back down and pretended to sleep. But she could feel his eyes watching the door all night, guarding her from threats she could not see. What kind of man had she married? Who was the silent human called Taiho? She did not know yet, but she would find out. 3 months passed on Horizon's Edge. The seasons did not change on a space station, but Yuna felt like she was living in a gentle spring. She had found work in a small trading office. The pay was not much, but it was honest. Every night, she came home to find Taiho waiting. He would cook dinner. They would eat together in comfortable silence. Then he would read his old books while she worked on the family accounts, trying to find a way to clear her debts. It was a simple life. A quiet life. And somehow, it had become precious to her. Yuna watched Taiho whenever she could. She was trying to understand him. He was like a puzzle with missing pieces. He had books written in an old Earth language. The letters were strange and beautiful, painted with brushes instead of printed by machines. She asked him once what language it was. He wrote on a piece of paper, Korean, homeland, so he could write. He simply chose not to speak. Every morning, he sat by the window for 1 hour before dawn. His eyes were closed. His breathing was slow and deep. He did not move at all during this time. Yuna learned not to disturb him. Whatever he was doing, it seemed important. The small green plant by the window was his treasure. He cared for it every day. He gave it water. He turned it toward the light. He spoke to it sometimes, though no words came out. His lips moved in silent conversation with a tiny plant. Yuna found it strangely touching. This silent, mysterious man had a soft heart. He was gentle with small things. He was gentle with her too. When she came home tired, he made her tea. When she was sad about her father, he sat beside her without speaking. His presence was comfort enough. When she walked through dangerous parts of the station, he appeared beside her without being called. He always placed himself between her and any threat. Her friend Myray visited one afternoon. Myray was Valari like Yuna, but from a wealthy family. She had silver jewelry in her hair and expensive clothes on her body. She looked around Taiho's small room with barely hidden disgust. When Taiho left for work, Myray spoke freely. She told Yuna that she was wasting her life. She said that Yuna should divorce the human and find a real husband. She said that humans were beneath them. Yuna said nothing, but she felt angry in a way she had never felt before. Myray also brought bad news. The Keth Syndicate had not forgotten about Yuna. They were looking for ways around the marriage protection. They had lawyers searching for loopholes in the law. It was only a matter of time. Yuna felt cold fear in her stomach. She had thought she was safe. She had been wrong. The syndicate sent a message. His name was Gruul. Gruul was Keth, a species of large reptilian creatures with green scales and yellow eyes. He was 2 meters tall and twice as wide as a human. His teeth were sharp and his claws were long. He worked as an enforcer for the syndicate, which meant he hurt people for money. He began appearing at Yuna's workplace. He would stand outside the door and watch her through the window. He never said anything threatening directly. He did not need to. His presence was threat enough. The third time Gruul appeared, Taiho was suddenly there. Yuna did not know how her husband knew. She had not told him. But when she looked up from her work, Taiho was standing between her and the window where Gruul watched. The human was half the size of the reptile. He looked like prey standing before a predator. But Gruul's yellow eyes flickered with something strange. For just a moment, he seemed uncertain. Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound. Gruul spoke through the glass. His voice was mocking. He asked what the little mute would do. Would he write an angry letter? Would he stay silent very loudly? Taiho did not react. He simply stood there until Gruul walked away. That night, Yuna made a decision. She needed to know the truth. She sat across from Taiho at their small table. She looked into his dark eyes and asked the question that had been burning inside her for months. She asked him why he did not speak. She asked him if he could speak at all. Taiho was still for a long moment. His eyes held hers. She could see something moving behind them. Pain, maybe. Or memory. Or both. Then he opened his mouth and spoke. His voice was rough and low, like a machine that had not been used in years. The words came slowly, each one carefully chosen. He said 3 words. I made promises. Yuna felt her whole body shiver. It was the first time she had heard his voice. There was weight in those words. There was history. There was suffering. She wanted to ask more. What promises? To whom? Why? But his eyes asked her not to. They asked her to wait. To trust him. To be patient. She nodded slowly. She could wait. Whatever secrets he carried, he would share them when he was ready. That night, she lay in bed and thought about those 3 words. She thought about the calluses on his hands, the way he moved, the respect other humans showed him, the way Gruul had hesitated for just one moment. Her husband was not a simple cargo worker. He was something else, something hidden, something dangerous. And the danger was coming closer. The next morning, Gruul's message arrived. The syndicate had found their loophole. The marriage was going to be declared invalid. They were coming for Yuna in 3 days. 3 days. Then her quiet life would end. She looked at Taiho. He had read the message too. His face was calm, but his eyes were different now. They were harder, colder, the eyes of a man preparing for battle. The night came too quickly. Yuna sat in the small room she had come to call home. 3 days had passed like 3 hours. Now the sun was setting behind the stars, and the syndicate was coming. Taiho moved around the room quietly. He had sent her home early from work. He had cooked her favorite meal. He had even watered his small plant one extra time, touching its leaves gently as if saying goodbye. Yuna could not eat. Fear sat in her stomach like a stone. She watched her husband and tried to memorize his face. After tonight, she might never see him again. They heard the footsteps at the same time. Heavy boots on metal floors. Many feet walking together. The sound of weapons clicking and claws scraping. They were here. The door exploded inward. 6 Keth enforcers entered the room, their green scales shining under the lights. They were huge, each one a mountain of muscle and teeth. They carried energy weapons and wore armor on their chests. Gruul entered last. He was smiling, showing all his sharp teeth. He held up a document and said the marriage was over. He said the courts had declared it invalid. He said Yuna now belonged to the syndicate. He told her to come quietly, or there would be pain. Yuna could not move. Her body was frozen with terror. Then Taiho stood up from his chair. He stood slowly, like a man who had all the time in the world. His face was calm. His breathing was steady. He looked at the 6 armed warriors and their leader without any fear. Grohl laughed. He asked the other enforcers if they saw this. The mute human wanted to play hero. He told Taiho to step aside. He called him nothing. He called him less than nothing. Taiho did not move. Grohl's smile faded. He ordered Taiho to move now or die. Taiho reached slowly under his worn jacket. His hand came out holding something long and thin, wrapped in old cloth. He unwrapped it carefully, and the cloth fell away. In his hand was a sword. The blade was beautiful. It was curved slightly, like a crescent moon. The metal was dark gray with patterns flowing through it like water. The handle was wrapped in black cord. Near the guard, there were symbols carved into the steel. Every calf in the room went still. One of the enforcers, the smallest one, whispered to Grohl. His voice was shaking. He said he knew those symbols. He said that was a Warang blade. He said the human was a Warang. Grohl's yellow eyes went wide. The Warang were a legend. Every species that traveled the stars had heard stories about them. They were Earth's secret warriors, trained from childhood in the old ways. They took vows of silence during their years of service. They did not fight for money or power. They fought to protect the innocent. The story said a single Warang could kill 100 enemies. The story said they moved like shadows and struck like lightning. The story said they were the reason humanity had survived when stronger species tried to destroy them. Most aliens thought the Warang were myths. Scary stories humans told to make themselves seem important. But the blade in Taiho's hand was real. The symbols were real. And the look in his eyes was very, very real. Grohl recovered first. He shouted at his men. He told them not to be afraid of stories. He reminded them that they were 6 armed warriors. Taiho was one human with an old sword. He ordered them to kill him. The enforcers raised their weapons. Taiho moved. Yuna could not describe what happened next. It was too fast for her eyes to follow. One moment, Taiho was standing still. The next moment, he was among them like a ghost made of blades. She saw flashes of silver. She heard screams. She saw huge calf bodies falling to the floor. Green blood sprayed through the air. 11 seconds. She counted later, trying to make sense of it. 11 seconds from start to finish. When Taiho stopped moving, all 6 enforcers were on the ground. They were alive, but broken. Arms bent the wrong way. Legs that would never walk straight again. Weapons cut in half. Grohl was the last one standing. His weapon was gone. 3 of his claws were missing. He was staring at Taiho with pure terror in his yellow eyes. Taiho walked toward him slowly. His sword was clean. Not a single drop of blood on the blade. He had cut so precisely that the blood did not touch him. Grohl fell to his knees. He begged. He said he was just following orders. He said he had a family. He promised to leave Yuna alone forever. Taiho stopped in front of him. For the first time in months, he spoke more than 3 words. His voice was soft and clear. He spoke in perfect galactic common. He told Grohl to carry a message to his masters. He said this woman was under his protection. He said the next enforcers they sent would not survive. Grohl nodded frantically. He grabbed 2 of his wounded men and dragged them toward the door. The other enforcers crawled after him, leaving trails of green blood. In moments, they were gone. Yuna sat frozen in her chair. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it might break. She stared at her husband, at the sword in his hand, at the blood on the floor. This was not the quiet man who watered his plant and cooked her meals. This was something else. Someone else. A warrior from legend. A killer who moved faster than sight. Taiho cleaned his blade with a cloth. He sheathed it carefully. Then he turned to Yuna and did something she did not expect. He bowed his head, low and deep. An apology. He was sorry for the violence. Sorry for the secrets. Sorry that she had to see this part of him. Yuna found her voice. It came out as a whisper. She asked who he really was. Taiho raised his head. His eyes were sad and tired. The eyes of a man who had seen too much death. He answered simply. He said his name was Taiho. He said he was her husband. And for the first time, he said he would tell her everything. The blood had been cleaned from the floor. The broken door had been replaced. But nothing would ever be the same again. Yuna sat on the bed while Taiho sat on the floor across from her. For the first time, he was going to tell her his story. His voice was still rough from years of silence, but the words came easier now. He began at the beginning. He was born on Earth, in a small village in the mountains of Korea. His family had been Warang for 30 generations. The tradition passed from parent to child like blood. When he was 12 years old, they took him to the mountain temple. For the next 15 years, he trained. He learned to fight with swords, spears, and empty hands. He learned to move in silence. He learned to kill in 100 different ways. But that was not all. The Warang were not just killers. They were also poets, philosophers, and healers. They learned music and art. They studied history and languages. They meditated for hours to find peace in their souls. A Warang was supposed to be complete. A warrior who could take life, but who understood the value of life. A killer with a gentle heart. At 27, Taiho took his vows. He promised to protect the innocent. He promised to never use his skills for personal gain. And he promised to remain silent during his years of active service. Speaking was for normal people. A Warang let his actions speak for him. For the next 15 years, Taiho served humanity in the shadows. He went to distant planets where humans were being enslaved. He freed them. He went to space stations where criminals preyed on the weak. He stopped them. He never announced himself. He never took credit. He simply did his duty and disappeared. Yuna listened without breathing. Her husband had been a legend walking among ordinary people. A ghost in human form. Then Taiho's voice grew heavy. He came to the part of his story that hurt. 3 years ago, he was sent to a mining colony on a distant moon. A criminal group was using human children as slave labor. His mission was to free them. He succeeded. He killed the criminals and saved the children. But one child was different from the others. A little girl named Somi. She was only 7 years old. She had been in the mines for 2 years. She was sick and weak, but her eyes were still bright with hope. She looked at Taiho and asked him his name. A Warang should not answer. A Warang should remain silent. But Somi was so small and so scared and had been through so much darkness. Taiho broke his vow. He told her his name. Somi smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in 2 years. She said she liked his name. Then she closed her eyes and died in his arms. Yuna felt tears running down her face. She did not try to stop them. Taiho continued. After Somi died, he could not serve anymore. He had broken his vow. He had failed to save her. He could not forgive himself. He left the Warang order. He was not expelled. His masters understood. Sometimes a warrior's heart simply breaks. He came to Horizon's edge to disappear. He took the lowest job he could find. He kept his silence, not because of his vow anymore, but because he had nothing left to say. He watered his plant because Somi had loved plants. He cooked simple meals because that was all he deserved. Then one day, a blue-skinned woman with silver eyes came to him. She was desperate and afraid. She reminded him of Somi somehow, that same innocent hope hiding behind fear. He could not save Somi, but maybe he could save Yuna. So he nodded yes to her proposal. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt like his life had meaning again. Taiho finished his story and sat in silence. His head was bowed. His hands rested on his knees. He waited for Yuna to speak, to judge him, to see him for what he truly was. Yuna moved from the bed to the floor. She sat in front of him and took his rough hands in hers. She told him that Somi would be proud of him. She told him that he was a good man. She told him that she was grateful he had saved her. Taiho looked up. His eyes were wet. Warriors could cry too. For a long moment, they simply sat together, holding hands in the quiet room. Then a knock came at the new door. Taiho was on his feet instantly, his hand moving toward his blade. But the knock was polite, not aggressive. A friendly knock. Yuna opened the door. Standing outside was a Valari male with dark blue skin and tired eyes. It took her a moment to recognize him. It was her brother, Jinho. Jinho had left the family years ago. He had changed his name and cut all ties. He worked as an information broker now, selling secrets to whoever paid. Yuna had not seen him since their father's funeral. He came inside quickly and told them that something had changed. The syndicate was not backing down. After what Taiho did to their enforcers, the leader of the syndicate had become personally involved. The Patriarch was an old Keth, the most powerful crime lord in 3 star systems. He had ruled for 50 years by crushing anyone who challenged him. When he heard that one human had defeated 6 of his warriors, he did not feel fear. He felt insulted. The Patriarch was sending more than enforcers this time. He was sending his personal army. 50 warriors would arrive in 1 week. They would kill Taiho, take Yuna, and make an example of anyone who had helped them. Running would not work. The syndicate would find them anywhere. There was only one option. They had to strike first. They had to go to the Patriarch's headquarters and end this war before it started. Yuna expected Taiho to argue. It was a suicide mission. 1 man against an army. But Taiho simply nodded. He had already decided. Yuna stepped forward. She told him that she was coming too. Taiho shook his head. Too dangerous. Yuna stood firm. She told him that he was her husband. They faced things together. That was what marriage meant. For the first time since she had known him, Taiho smiled. It was a small smile, just a slight curve of his lips. But it changed his whole face. He nodded. Then he walked to the corner of the room and moved a panel in the wall. Behind it was a hidden case. He opened it slowly. Inside was his Warang armor. Black and scarlet, made of materials that could stop energy weapons. There were 2 blades inside as well. The curved sword he had already used and a longer, straighter blade meant for war. Taiho lifted the war blade and held it up to the light. The metal sang softly as it moved through the air. He was not a cargo worker anymore. He was Warang, and he was going to war. The moon called Darkfall hung in space like a black pearl. No sunlight reached its surface. The only light came from the syndicate fortress that covered half the moon like a metal scar. Taiho stood at the window of their small ship, watching the fortress grow larger. His black and scarlet armor covered his body. Both blades hung at his side. His face was calm, like a lake without wind. Behind him stood Yuna, Jinho, and 5 humans. The humans were old friends of Taiho from his years of service. When word spread that a Warang was going to war, they had come without being asked. They did not wear armor. They did not carry fancy weapons. But they moved like Taiho moved, and their eyes were the same. Yuna had spent 3 days learning everything about the Syndicate's fortress. Her merchant training was useful. She knew how criminal organizations worked. She knew about their security systems, their trade routes, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The fortress had 100 guards at any time. It had energy shields, weapon turrets, and alarm systems. It seemed impossible to attack. But Yuna had found a path. The fortress received supply ships every 6 hours. For 3 minutes during each delivery, the shields lowered to let the ships pass. 3 minutes was enough. Their ship landed in the cargo area without raising any alarms. Yuna had made fake documents that showed them as regular traders. The guards checked their papers and waved them through. Inside the fortress, they split up. Jinho would disable the alarm systems. 3 of the humans would destroy the shield generator. 2 would block the main entrance to prevent reinforcements. Taiho, Yuna, and the last human would go to the throne room where the Patriarch waited. The corridors were dark and cold. Keth guards walked past them without looking twice. The fake uniforms Yuna had provided were perfect. They were invisible. Then the alarms went silent. Jinho had done his job. A moment later, a distant explosion shook the floor. The shields were down. Now everyone knew they were here. Taiho began to run. Yuna followed, her heart pounding. Guards appeared ahead of them. They raised weapons and shouted commands. Taiho did not slow down. His blade left its sheath and became a line of silver light. 2 guards fell. 3 more. 4. He moved through them like water through rocks, never stopping, never pausing. Yuna saw more guards coming from behind. She pulled out the small weapon Taiho had given her and fired. Her aim was not perfect, but it was enough. The guards dove for cover. They reached the throne room doors. They were massive, made of black metal, covered in gold designs that showed the Patriarch's victories. Symbols of power meant to frighten visitors. Taiho cut through them like paper. The throne room was huge. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. Torches burned along the walls, casting dancing shadows. At the far end sat the Patriarch on a throne made of bones. He was old, even for a Keth. His scales were pale gray instead of green. His eyes were milky with age. But his claws were still sharp, and his voice was still strong. 12 warriors stood between the throne and the door. They were not regular guards. They were the Patriarch's personal soldiers, the best fighters in the Syndicate. Each one wore heavy armor and carried weapons that could cut through steel. The Patriarch spoke. He sounded almost amused. He said he had heard stories about the Warang. He said he had never believed them until now. He called Taiho impressive for a human. Then his voice turned cold. He called humans pets who had learned tricks. He said a dog could be trained to fight, but it was still just a dog. He ordered his warriors to prove it. The 12 warriors charged. Taiho handed his shorter blade to the human beside him. He drew his war blade, the longer sword meant for battle. He took a breath. Then he became the storm. The throne room turned into chaos. Blades clashed against blades. Bodies flew through the air. Blood painted the floor in patterns of red and green. Taiho was everywhere and nowhere. He fought like no living thing should be able to fight. His blade cut through armor like it was cloth. His body bent around attacks that should have killed him. He was not just fast. He was something beyond speed. One by one, the warriors fell. Some died quickly. Others died slowly. None of them touched him. The last warrior dropped to the floor. The throne room was quiet, except for the sound of dripping blood. Taiho walked toward the throne. His blade was red now. His armor was stained with the blood of his enemies. But his eyes were clear and calm. The patriarch did not run. He was too old and too proud for that. He sat on his throne and watched death approach. Taiho stopped before him. He raised his blade and held it at the old Keth's throat. He gave the patriarch a choice. The syndicate would release all claims on Yuna's family. It would release all claims on every person it had taken for debt. It would stop using that cruel law forever. If the patriarch agreed, he would live. If he refused, he would die. The patriarch laughed. It was a weak, rattling sound. He asked why he should agree. He said Taiho would kill him anyway. He said humans could not be trusted. Taiho shook his head. He said he was Warang. He said his word was his life. If he made a promise, he would keep it. That was the difference between them. The patriarch stared into Taiho's eyes for a long moment. He was searching for lies. He found none. Slowly, the old Keth nodded. He agreed to the terms. He ordered his surviving guards to stand down. He signed documents that freed Yuna and everyone like her. Taiho lowered his blade. He turned and walked back to Yuna. He took her hand. They left the throne room together, walking over the bodies of fallen warriors. Behind them, the most powerful crime lord in 3 star systems sat alone on his throne, defeated by a single human with a sword. 1 year later, Yuna stood in their new home. It was bigger than their old room, but not by much. They did not need much space. She and Taiho ran a small trading company now. They were known for fair deals and honest work. They were also known as protectors. When people were in trouble, when powerful forces threatened the weak, Yuna and Taiho helped. Taiho stood by the window, holding their small green plant. It had grown larger this year. New leaves were spreading toward the light. He spoke more now. Not a lot, but enough. His voice was no longer rough. It was warm and soft, especially when he spoke to her. Yuna walked up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. She asked him what he was thinking about. He said he was thinking about how lucky he was. He said he had found a reason to live again. He said he had found her. Yuna smiled and held him tighter. Across the galaxy, the story spread. People told it in bars and markets and quiet homes. The story of a Valari woman who married a silent human. The story of what happened when he drew his blade. The story changed humanity forever. Other species began to look at humans differently. If one silent man could defeat an army, what else were humans capable of? The answer was simple. Humans were capable of anything when they had something to protect. And somewhere in the darkness of space, other Warang heard the story. They smiled and nodded. Their brother had found peace. Their brother had found love. Their brother had reminded the galaxy why humanity should never be underestimated. The silent storm had passed, but its echo would last forever.